of Industry and Commerce, and the President of the Caribbean Congress of Labor. If you note, a wide and diverse cross-section of professionals are involved in the operations of the CCJ, in the management of that trust fund. If you note, there is no politician or no political figure identified among those 9 persons. They are not responsible for reporting to any politician anywhere in the region. So that's how the court is funded, independently. It's already funded, it's already paid for, and if Grenada joins the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ, we are not required to pay 1 further cent. So I think that it is extremely important to know, to note that, because some people advance the proposition that we need to basically use the money to take care of our local court system. What we're really doing, we spend money, we borrow money, we spend it, we pay it back, and we're not utilizing the institution for which we have invested all these monies. So that's the funding of the court. The second aspect of independence relates to the appointment of judges. Are the judges appointed by the politicians of the region? Are the appointments of the judges, is the appointment of any judge on the CCJ influenced by a prime minister or leader of the opposition or any politician in the region? And the answer again is no. There is an independent structure. The Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission, RJLSC, which comprises 11 persons. It is chaired by the president of the CCJ, and the current president is Justice Adrian Saunders. And who are the other members of the JLSC? Listen carefully. See if you hear any politician named. 2 persons nominated jointly by the Organization of the Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. 1 chairman of the Judicial Services Commission of a contracting party, selected in rotation in the English alphabetical order for a period of 3 years. So you always have either we have now the chairman of the JLSC of the Eastern Caribbean States who sits, that's Justice Pereira, Justice Janice Pereira, and then when you rotate, after 3 years, you'll have the Jamaica Chief Justice or the Trinidad Chief Justice, the Barbadian Chief Justice. They are all rotated, senior judicial officers. The chairman of a public service commission of a contracting party, selected in rotation, in reverse. So you start from Z, come up. English alphabetical order for a period of 3 years. And I believe the sitting chairman of the Public Service Commission of Jamaica currently sits on the JLSC. We have 2 persons from civil society nominated jointly by the Secretary General of the community, that's the CARICOM, and the Director General of the OECS for a period of 3 years following consultations with regional non-governmental organizations. And you have 2 distinguished jurists nominated jointly by the Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of the West Indies, the Deans of the Faculties of Law of any of the contracting parties, and the Chairman of the Council of Legal Education. And the Council of Legal Education is that body responsible for law schools throughout the region. And we have a law school in Trinidad, Jamaica, Norman Manley, and Bahamas, the Eugene Depuche Law School. And then you have 2 persons nominated jointly by the bar or law associations of the contracting parties. Again, no political figure involved in the JLSC. And the responsibility of the JLSC is to appoint judges. There is a vacancy at the level of the CCJ. You meet the qualifications, you are interested in the job, you apply not to a prime minister, but to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And they determine if you should be hired or not. And in doing so, they have no duty to consult with anyone. It is only when the president, a vacancy arises in the presidency of the CCJ, that the heads of government of the Caribbean community become involved. But even so, they cannot select a president arbitrarily. If a vacancy arises for the president, you apply to the JLSC. The JLSC will determine the persons qualified. And they may come up with a short list, or they may make a recommendation. And if they make a recommendation to the heads, and the heads do not agree with the recommendation, it has to go back with reasons to the JLSC, with good reason too, and the JLSC will always select the persons who are qualified. So the heads of government simply have to approve ultimately, not arbitrarily select, who becomes the president of the CCJ. And I just want to compare that system with the United States of America Supreme Court. We know over the last 3 years, you have heard it probably on CNN, Fox News. Maybe you're not conscious of it, but if you listen carefully, you would hear there is always the issue of contention in the United States as to the judges sitting on this U.S. Supreme Court, which is akin to our CCJ. It's the highest court in the United States. And just before the presidential elections, one of the judges, the senior judges, Justice Scalia, he passed away. Right? He passed away, and he was considered a conservative judge. When you speak, unlike speaking about the CCJ, when you speak of the judges on the United States Supreme Court, they are well categorized. As my good friend Jerry Edwin in the audience can tell you, they are liberals and conservatives. And just before the death of the last Supreme Court judge, the court was considered a conservative court. 5-4. 4 liberals and 5 conservatives. 1 conservative passed away within 2 years before the presidential elections. And the Republicans were saying President Obama ought not to nominate the next judge because elections are too close. Let's see who wins elections first. Leave it to nominate. And you know why it was important? Because with the death of that judge, the U.S. Supreme Court, 4 conservatives, 4 liberals. And you needed, if the Democrats came to power, then it was expected that the president would nominate a liberal and will tilt the court 5-4. 5 liberals, 4 conservatives. If a Republican became president, as he eventually became president, then he was expected to nominate a conservative judge. So you don't have any JLSC where you're sending your applications independently. Just listen to CNN and Fox, because there's a debate going on right now in relation to the Supreme Court, because one judge retired over the last 2 months. The president nominates and the Senate approves. That's how it takes place in the United States of America. So while we here in the Caribbean are criticizing and questioning the ability of our own court to be independent, we have two great institutions, the CCJ Trust Fund and the JLSC, that protects the interests of the Caribbean people to ensure that the court remains independent. Just let me quickly move on. I'm sure that my time is expired, but I was asked to speak on the professionalism of the court, and I just want to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because this court deals with real cases that affects real people. And some people say, what this CCJ thing is about is for them lawyers and them. It's for the judges and them. That is not we think. But listen to this. We have our own CCJ. And I want to just identify 5 cases that the CCJ has dealt with in the last 13 years that impacts significantly either on the Caribbean people, including each and every one of us inside here. Or, if you understand the judgments in these cases, then this issue about CCJ ruling for politicians, about ruling for their friends because they know their friends across the Caribbean and their fellow judges, just listen to these examples. 1, the Shanique Mary case out of Barbados. And may I indicate that when this case arose in 2013, our special guest speaker, Mia Mottley, was not Prime Minister of Barbados. Let me make that very clear. But in this case, and this is a case in the original jurisdiction, not the appellate jurisdiction, but it tells you how the CCJ approaches its cases. It's not about Barbados was the first to join, so therefore we should be committed to Barbados. Shanique Mary was an ordinary Jamaican citizen who never traveled in her entire life, about 22, 23 at the time. And she went to Barbados for a vacation. When she landed, she was subjected to certain treatment, including being strip searched and an internal intimate body search was done. She was denied entry and sent back to Jamaica the following day after overnighting in a cell. And as I always say, without even the benefit of a shower, was sent back to Jamaica. That's an ordinary citizen of Jamaica. And what did she do? As we all know, she sued the government, the state of Barbados, in the original jurisdiction of the court. And the court ruled for her and awarded compensation against Barbados. That is not a Shanique Mary case. That is not a case that benefits Shanique Mary alone. That is a case that benefits each and every single one of us in this hall who travels. Any one of us. Because it laid down the law as to what immigration officers and customs officers in the different countries ought to do. Because you have freedom of movement, and it can only be restricted in certain circumstances, and the CCJ laid down the law. That judgment is binding, not only on Jamaica, but every single Caribbean country that's a member of the Caribbean Court of Justice, including Grenada. And it's stated more particularly that you can't just deport a citizen just like that. You have to afford certain facilities, including phone calls, to contact family, to contact attorney, and it laid down the law. The Caribbean has never been the same in terms of immigration and customs officers, with a few exceptions, I must say, but since the Shanique Mary case. Secondly, the second case And that deals with, again, I use this case for access, as AG and Chair mentioned. CCJ means ultimately access or greater access to justice. You know, there was a case out of Guyana in December 2017. Case is Blairmont Rice Investment, Inc. versus Cayman Shankar Company Limited. And it dealt with leave to appeal. It was a leave to appeal. But you know, that case was the first case in which the senior counsel who represented the appellant in that case was allowed to remain in his home through the technology. He argued the case from his house. He didn't have to even go to the High Court in Guyana. He stayed in his house and he argued the case. And the CCJ makes provision for persons who cannot afford relation to lawyers or cannot afford to come to Trinidad through the high technology which they use. And in this case, that was the first case, probably anyway, in the Commonwealth, and certainly in the CCJ, where a senior counselor stayed from his living room or study, someplace in his house with a nice background, I suppose, to argue that case on behalf of his clients. The third case I'm going to refer to, Dean Boyce and others versus the Judicial and Legal Services Commission of Belize. Again, the talk, them CCJ boys, they know their partners all throughout the country. The Caribbean is a small place. They're studying UE together. They know one another, and therefore they will protect their own. That's the strong line you hear about. The boys in England don't know us, so they don't care, and therefore they can be independent. This Dean Boyce case was one referred to as judicial acumen, and more importantly, he had all of these outstanding judgments, delays in writing judgments. He was not writing judgments, and therefore he lodged a complaint before the Judicial and Legal Services Commission to remove him. While that complaint was pending, the judge was promoted to the Court of Appeal. And the issue became, the JLSC says, these things you're complaining about were relevant only to this judge as a High Court judge, not as a judge of the Court of Appeal. So we're not hearing it, because it's not relevant here in the Court of Appeal now. The applicants brought judicial review proceedings to the High Court. The High Court agreed. Justice Courtney Abel agreed and sent it to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission and said, these complaints are relevant, you must hear it. They appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal of Belize reversed the decision of Justice Abel. And persistent as those guys were, they appealed to their final court, which is now the CCJ. And the CCJ reversed the Court of Appeal of Belize and said, these complaints are relevant. Delays in writing judgments when you sit in the High Court must be relevant to the Court of Appeal. We are not pronouncing on it, but they reversed the Court of Appeal, and that matter now, involving a senior sitting judge of the Court of Belize, is now before the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Dean Boyce and others. And may I just, again, we had the AG of Guyana and Cedric Richardson that I just want to use. It's a recent case, but the importance of having a final Court of Appeal, especially to settle fundamental issues. And this is one where that deals with the 2-term limits for president in Guyana, and an applicant says, listen, this 2-term limits thing breaching my constitutional rights. if I want to elect a prime minister or president, I must be able to choose who I want. So the 2-term limits that were introduced in Guyana, he sought to have it declared unconstitutional. He went to the High Court and won. He went to the Court of Appeal and won. You know what that would have meant? If it stayed there, there would no longer be 2-term limits in Guyana. But then the AG of Guyana appealed to the CCJ. And the essence, because of time, the CCJ reversed both the High Court and Court of Appeal and said, no, the law is constitutional, and they explained why in their very detailed judgments. And I just use that case to show why it is so important to have the wisdom of a final Court of Appeal. And the final case that AG referred to, and I'll just refer to it from a different perspective. Our major complaint against the court system, if you do a survey among the people, and you speak to the man in the street, say justice takes too long. It takes too long. Why go into the court and have a case 10 years pending and spending a set of money? The CCJ is out to right that wrong, and it is the final court. In Eddie Vento's case, this is a case concerning whether a Commonwealth citizen can vote in the elections in Barbados. And I'm not too sure who he voted for eventually. But that case, this gentleman, elections were on May 24th. He filed an appeal to the CCJ after working hours, 5 p.m. on the Friday. That's when registries close. You can't do it in Grenada or anywhere else in the region. He filed it because they have electronic filing at 5 o'clock. It reached the judges through the registrar and their system the Friday night. Because of the urgency, the CCJ set the hearing date for Sunday. And that Sunday, by the way, was Mother's Day too. I could imagine the rows in the home when the husbands in the CCJ were going out to sit on a case Sunday, Mother's Day, at 12. At 12, the Solicitor General in Barbados asked for an adjournment. Say things moving too fast here. Say, okay, we stand it down 1 hour. 1 hour. By 2:15, that case was completed. The CCJ ruled and had a written judgment within 48 hours. I say no more.